Okay, good.
Yay, we can hear you.
I had to switch computers again, so I don't know. Did we start yet?
No, we were waiting for you. I just asked everybody who had standards and expectations for their agents, and then who held them accountable to those expectations and standards. We didn't get a lot of positive response.
Listen, before we jump in, Paula, do you want to tell him about our new thing that we're going to do? Because I'm worried we'll forget, because we're going to get so jazzed about this topic.
Yes, because we forgot last week.
Because I was so jazzed. Yeah, we totally forgot.
So the last Thursday of every month, that last mastermind of every month, we're actually going to do a book club. So this month, because of Megan, we're doing Start With Why. We've had to listen to her quote it all month, so we figured we might as well read it with her.
I'm so excited about it too.
So
how's it gonna work, Paula?
So if you guys are interested, grab the book, read it, and then we'll talk about it at the end of the month.
Love it.
That means I might have to actually buy it. My library subscription is probably gonna expire by then.
It is a book worth owning. I will say that.
Truly. Yeah, truly.
So the ideas.
Oh, go ahead, Zach.
Oh, I was going to say, so the ideas behind this is that obviously our preference would be you get the book, you read it, you come with your notes so we can kind of interact the highlights. We're going to be going over the main bullet points and how we can apply them to either our business and life. With that being said, if for whatever reason, right, every bookstore shuts down and you can't get the book, still come to the call or invite people, because again, you'll still take away value, because the idea is we're going to take it and apply it to actual business and life. So that's the conversations we'll be having with the book. So it's not going to be like chapter by chapter. The expectation is you would have read it, have an understanding of it, and then some bullet points or things that you're going to take away and apply so we can use them. So some real good action items.
Yeah.
So excited. Okay, should we dive into standards creating agent standards? Or maybe for the first time, or maybe you're just now starting to think about this topic. I spent a lot of time this week thinking about it because, I don't know, personally on our team, we were like, oh, that's not important. Everyone is just going to work. My basic philosophy in life is like, if I'm running as hard as I can at a target, other people will just kind of like start running with me and it'll be fine and we'll all have fun and yay. And obviously that's not real life. So that's my pure, like my high optimism on my KPI coming through. So like, I realized that late in the game. And so that's the perspective I'm bringing to the conversation, is sort of like, how do you change or how do you create standards when you've had none in the past? Zach, Paula, what about you guys?
We always had standards and expectations on our team, and we love to change them for team members. Because if they couldn't meet them, we wanted to keep them, and let's just change the standards and expectations, which we'll have a whole discussion about that also.
Love it. What's your perspective, Zach, today?
Standards or suggestions moved from an area of having suggestions into standards and upholding those. And it was tough. And I wouldn't say I got there or the team got there, because what happened is we experienced some turnover, right? And I would say like a greater than usual turnover rate we had, because you had that friction there, which is a whole nother skill set, right? Is working with these agents and having the conversations. And when you don't have that on your growth plan and you're not prepared to have those conversations, it could be a real challenge when you move into that standard part. And yet at the end of the day, it all starts with us, right? So my perspective is you absolutely need to have those standards, because that's your culture. And if it's not on your growth plan to get better at those conversation and skills, let's start there.
So those of you that don't have standards, why don't you have standards? Is it like Megan, where you just hired agents and thought they would do what they were supposed to do? Or what might the reason be?
Our standards became suggestions.
So Liz is Team Zach.
Like, I follow Megan, that if I'm doing this, that's what I feel like you should be doing it too. And why aren't you? I don't understand it. Yeah. And I want to be on a team of people who have ownership for their own responsibility. And then when I have to tell you what to do, I feel like, oh, well, maybe you're the wrong person. But really, we should have something written, and consequences. Consequences is the part that, what's the sense of having these suggestions or standards if there's nothing that backs them up or makes you buy into them and continue to work towards that standard?
Yeah. And I think that's probably where we fail, is we don't go far enough out in the planning of what is exactly going to happen if they don't meet the standards. And so we just expect everybody to meet the standards, and they don't meet the standards, and then what do? We change the standard. Instead of thinking, having a plan in place that if they don't meet the standard, this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah, and you could look really one step. Oh, go ahead, Megan.
Well, I was just going to suggest, since like we've got those two, like creating standards and then standards are not suggestions. Like, would it be okay? I actually made 3 bullet points for you guys on creating, and then Paula, you and Zach could go how to like actually take it home and like make sure those aren't suggestions, because I didn't go that far. I just went my 3 steps into actually creating the standards.
Go for it.
Awesome. So number 1, and here's I think like the thing that so many of us miss, is clarity. So number 1, I want you to write down clarity. What exists today? So not what do you kind of feel about it or what do you think it might be, but like actually get specific over what exists today. What's your team structure, your standards, your culture? Like, describe it. Not how you wish it was, but how it truly, truly is. So take your optimism goggles off and just take a hard look at what it is and just describe it for reality. Then ask yourself, does my reality, is it in integrity with the why of our company? So does my reality match my why? And if not, where am I out of integrity in that? Yeah, she's totally calling me out. I was just gonna not mention the book. If you're not familiar with the book, think about it as your vision, like your vision for your company, your vision for your company's future is your current reality and integrity with that vision. So some of you guys, like, I'm looking at you, Cameron, like you guys have like a really strong vision, like your big why is like it permeates your team. So like when you're thinking about like, is what is real today, is it in integrity with what we want to do? And there's this building generational wealth. So like what a beautiful, sort of why, and just think through that. The second is, if it's off, what is off? So it might not be what you think it is, which was my experience. So for a long time, my rainmaker and I thought, if everybody would just like get in there and make some phone calls. But then when we truly sat down and we described not what we wanted, but what we had, and not the culture we wanted, but the culture we had, we realized there were a lot of things that were off, like out of integrity with what we said was going to be true, like we said was our vision and the way we were operating. And some of those things, frankly, some of those things were me and the rainmaker. So, we said we had a team that focused on, lead gen, but my rainmaker never called. Like he was just, and he was not going to do that. And yet we hadn't drawn the line saying like, here's his top 20%. We just sort of all pretended like he was actually calling, but everybody also knew he wasn't. So we were like way out of integrity, like with what we were saying and what we were actually doing. Now, is it okay that he didn't call? Yes. We just needed to like define his position and how he was moving the business forward. and then be honest about how that was going to get us to our bigger vision versus, you know, what we were actually doing, which was just all pretending like it was fine. So it might not be what you think it is. It might actually be you. It might actually be the rainmaker that's out of alignment or out of integrity. And that's okay. We just need to fix it. So point number 2, write down ownership. So we had clarity, now we have ownership. Own the fact that you know, created this mess, or that you helped create it, that this is your doing. Like, just go ahead and own that. It's fine. You'll be fine. We're going to get out of it on the other end. Just go ahead and own your DNA in it. Everybody respects that. You know, I find like on a team, when you go in and you're like, yeah, I messed up. Like, we came in and I messed it up. I messed it up, and here's how I did that, and here's how we're going to move forward. People really respect that, and you're not going to get so much of the, whoa, you never told me I had to do blah, 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 because you're going to walk in and just own it and say, I messed it up. So own it. Own the fix also. So own the problem, like you did that, and own the solution. You're going to be integral to that and go ahead and take ownership for it. Be accountable for the solution. Step number 3, action. So great. Now you've looked at what you have, you look at what you want to have, you found the gap, right, where you're out of integrity. You've owned that you created the problem, and you're going to own the solution. Now we've got to actually build you an action plan that walks you out of where you are to where you want to be, because you can't just, like, you walked down into it, you can't just step out. You have to walk back out of it. And when you try to just like step out, you blow the team up. So you need your step-by-step action, like how you're going to walk from where you are to where you want to be. And I know that Zach and Paula will have a lot to add under that one, because that's where I stopped. I was like, those are your 3 things, man. Do that and you're good to go. That's not really true either. So Paula, Zach, take it away.
I loved what you said, particularly about the clarity. I was going to build off of that to what Paula was saying. I think for a lot of us too, and myself included when I was first building, they become suggestions because we're not clear on where they came from either, right? Like, I envision it just like I did on my team. We were like, hey, what's the standard? 2 transactions a month. Oh, 24? Like, that seems to be like the standard. Or just like a new person getting into real estate, what's the first thing they say? I want to make 100,000. Great. Why? Right? And I think that was the same thing with the standards. When you look at it, it's possible if you're not clear up front, the reason those are the standards and what that's going to do to the business according to the GPS and what that year outlook is for profitability, the leads you're going to generate. So the economic model, if we're not clear there, then our standards are just something we created on paper. We don't have buy-in, so therefore it's hard for us to hold anyone to it because we're not real sure either. It's just something we wrote down.
Paula, I can't hear you. Something.
We lost Paula.
Yeah, weird. That was so deep though, Zach. I love that. That was, I mean, that's super insightful. Like, we don't know, so we're also not gonna hold anybody else to it because we're not real sure about it ourselves.
I guess I'm going back to rewriting my standards now.
You're rewriting everything anyway. You might as well add that one in, Leah.
Well, and like, if we can take it, I know this is about accountability around this and just a different perspective on this. Another way to look at that, right, is just like I said, when it comes to even our personal lives, we'll say things like, hey, I want to make 1,000, I want to make 100,000 or 50,000, whatever that number is for you. What are your standards and what are you going to do to get there? Mm-hmm. And we don't even do that, right? And some of our personal lives. And it's very much connected to the business you're in because we're hiring people into that culture. And as Megan said, which was brilliant, when you go through, right, that ownership piece of it and our DNA, it's in there, right? It's very much in there. Did we get Paula back?
Yep, I'm back. I don't know what happened there. So I guess this brings up the question is, truly, and I love what you did, Megan, and yet how do we truly figure out what the standard is?
Great question. Are you asking me? I'll take a crack at it if nobody else wants to.
Well, I think what I just heard, because of the way you explained it, Megan, and then what Zach said about building the clarity around it, which is why I had this big aha that I needed to go back and rewrite it, was it's very easy. I mean, 26 years, 9 years KW, okay, here are our standards. Here's what the expectations are. But if you were to ask me why those are our standards, I can't answer that question. But now that I'm digging into this business here, and we're looking at the numbers the way you and I are looking at them, and what those goals and what those are, now it's easier to back into these standards. So I want to scrap what I wrote because I was supposed to write something that I thought was right and go back and look at all the other work that I've done to recreate those standards based on that foundation.
Beautifully said.
Is anybody struggling with this that wants more clarity?
And I think a lot of it comes to, right, the economic model. So how many of us have the economic model wrote out? And you can find that from MAPS models or MREA.
Michelle, what page is that on? I literally just got off a coaching call with Michelle, and this was the
She's
topic.
going for it. I love it.
I did not know that, Michelle. I'm sorry.
Wait a minute. 131, 181, 183. Which one? One of those. Economic model. So that would be page 131, MREA.
So now if you look at that economic model, does it support the org chart that you and your rainmaker have envisioned? Right, because that is a great starting point, not the end all, but that is a great starting point to start reviewing the possibilities of what your standards could and should be. Goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, right? And what Megan brought up about clarity. And the reality of it is so many of us go 2 transactions a month, so 24. And we don't even know if our business model or our leads support that standard we're holding people to.
Right.
I guess a question on that is, if we're figuring out like how many agents we need to have on our team to meet our economic goals based on the economic model, do we assume that each agent is going to hit the standard, which was like the bare minimum? Or do we assume that there will be like a few agents who are going to do 2 or 3 times that? At what point?
Do they have a track record?
Yeah, well, so like, yes, we have 1 agent on our team who's really good. The rest don't have the track record. However, if we're planning like 3 years in the future, you know, if we're going to need so many agents, do we assume like the same ratio that 1 out of 6 agents is going to be a rock star and the other 5 are just going to, you know, do the minimum? Or should we assume that everyone else we bring on is also going to do the minimum?
The way I look at that is they should, with time, get better. So if somebody stays on your team, in 3 years, they should be doing better than they are today. So it's longevity on the team, track record, and how new the agent is. If you're a team full of new agents, you have no idea how they're going to perform, and they may come in with a goal of closing 5 a month, and yet they're brand new to real estate, and common sense tells you that that's going to be a struggle for them. So does it make sense to base your goal off of their dream or off of what you've seen reality to be?
I agree with Paula, and I would certainly focus on what the standard was in averages and look at that track record. And the reason why is if you hit an ebb and flow or dip, COVID, whatever, for that period of time, as long as everyone's performing there, it won't hurt a little bit of padding to what you plan for. Right? And that's not bad. So I think looking at that track record for maybe that upcoming year, absolutely. Over the long run, I would look at averages and what that conversion is and kind of build from there.
One way to think about it too, Liz, is to just create your own reality. So like if in year one, you've got 3 agents, and if you added it all together, your agents averaged 20 deals a year. And we're talking about like creating a 5-year economic model, like you're talking about projecting now, right? Like, so we go out into year 5 and we say, like in year 5, our ideal team would produce 30 units a year. Like each agent would produce 30 units a year. And then you walk it back, but you can only do that when you like take full number 2 on, right? Ownership. So then guys would be saying, we are going to either create a standard that is like not up for debate. So, 30 might be the minimum, or you're saying the team is going to be responsible for the conversion rates and the improvement of conversion rates up to a point that each agent could convert 30 by the leads they were given. So if you own the solution, I think you can say whatever you want.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, Megan.
Yep.
Paula, what did you do? So I'm curious to hear from you, because you said something super interesting, and I've seen on my teams even, where it's like you actually do a good job of enforcing, like you have a standard and you enforce it, and then someone you like or a high producer won't comply suddenly, and so you change it. So how'd you address that?
Well, if it's somebody who's been on the team that we know is capable of that and they're not complying, then it's a deeper conversation than that. And usually they're getting ready to offboard. It's more of, I think the struggle was those agents you brought on that were doing all the activities that were expected of them and could not hit the standards. And you're pouring into them to get them trained and have them get the skill set they need to succeed, and it's just not happening. And so instead of saying to ourselves, this person's not cut out for this industry, or this person's not cut out for this, they're just not getting it, you just keep pouring more into them, and you reduce the standard in the meantime because you see how hard they're working.
Well, and sometimes I think I feel like I try to take ownership of the fact that maybe I wasn't pouring into them enough, or I make the excuses for them but blame myself for it, so that it's easier to leave them in the position that they're in because it's my fault.
Yeah, how many of us have done that? Yeah. And it's funny because we take ownership sometimes of what they should be taking ownership of. Yeah.
Really, in the 30, 60, 90, you see that a lot too, because we say who owns the role, right? And yet a lot of times it's us owning the 30, 60, 90 because we change it or modify it or reword it to match what their performance is doing.
Yep.
Or just ignore it, which is also something we see 45 days in, and then there's suddenly no more checklists or check marks on it.
No idea what you're talking about.
And sometimes too, when we're starting to grow that team and we have these standards in place, we're not confident that the standards we have are achievable. And I think we second guess ourselves because we're not sure that the standards are achievable.
So that's a struggle that I was curious about, because like if you know what the standards need to be, but you know you might have to develop that talent, do you adjust the standards until the talent's developed? Or you see what I mean? Like,
my coach back when I was in that role did something great with me, and we actually made it so it was an increasing standard, so that we knew in that first 30 days they could handle this, and then we increased it the second 30 days, and then increased it, the third 30 days, until we got them to what the team standard was. And if at any point they didn't go to that next level, we knew that it was done.
love that.
I think that's a great, like, actual concrete tactical way to like walk from where you are today to where you want to go. And I do see a lot of teams say like, well, we have no standards now, but tomorrow you guys have to start calling for 3 hours a day. And like, that's just, it's like total failure. It's madness and chaos. Like, it just not gonna happen.
Create the stair standards. I like
Which brings in the reprogramming the agents. It's much easier to reprogram the agents when you're slowly moving into something than, like Megan said, all of a sudden it's like, okay, starting tomorrow, we're totally changing our structure and expectations and standards. This is what it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, as part of if you think about a SMART goal too, right? And I know there's a couple different variations of it, but that is realistic. So is it realistic? And I think that's where it comes to, like what Megan was saying, if the very next day you suddenly are increasing their calls from 2 that they've been doing for 20 minutes to 50, right? That's not very realistic as far as what they're going to be comfortable with and able to do. And I think there's something to be said for mid-year retreats, even quarterly retreats, where you can get this buy-in by simply going to your GPS or your goal and just taking a look and be like, look, this is where we're at, right? What's the gap? And then asking the question, what are we going to do now to get us there, right? Which allows them to have that influence and that confidence and kind of in the conversation, creating it, and then nudging, right, and coaching as we do to move them to what was our standard to begin with to get it there.
Yeah, because they're part of the conversation.
So guys, we've got 27 minutes left, and you guys are the real geniuses on this call. So like, what are you seeing? There's a Coach Fritz, he always says like, take it to the streets. Like, what are you seeing in real life on your real teams? Let's talk about it.
So I said already, we have suggestions, not standards. And I don't know if it's because we haven't been enforcing them. I don't know if it's because we have buy-in. I know we need to work on a lot of things. I guess I just, like, I'm at a loss. Like, where do we start? Do we just try and start the standards and try and get buy-in and then see whether or not that works? Do we start enforcing? And like Megan and I on our call yesterday, like, I feel like the one thing our team really needs to focus on is our scripts, because our agents aren't scripting even though it's a standard. And if they would do that, I feel like everything else would fall into place.
So then this goes back to, you need a leader somewhere. Both Megan and I had to step up as that leader. And yet you need a leader. Somebody needs to step up and lead the way and rally the troops and pull them together. You can't just say this is the way it's going to be and not have that leader.
And it might not be who you think it is.
Yeah.
Let's leave it at that, I guess.
And I'll give a thought on that too, and then I would love to hear the group and see what your thoughts are, right? And have that conversation. For me, I always call them just kind of testing the waters. I would start small and something that's achievable so I can see who's showing up. Because I'll know, right? If it's an easy task, like I heard you say script and role play. Just as example, if I'm going to start saying like, okay, we're going to script and role play 10, 15 minutes every morning, 9 a.m. That's achievable. It's easy. It's not too hard. Who shows up and who doesn't? Because then I know who potentially is going to be a partner in our business and fits the culture that's going to go forward because they're willing to put in the work. And those who don't, it gives you an idea at that point. Then it comes to the leadership of what are we going to do with them? Because it's clear that if they don't do this easy, achievable task, it's going to be a real challenge to get them to hit the actual standard of what we need to do.
I think with that, it also comes into the consistent, my favorite two words, consistency and persistency with it, because you get the people who buy in and they're all gung-ho for the first 48, 72 hours, and then all of a sudden they're not there that fifth day or that sixth day or that seventh day. And so the longevity of even those smaller tasks, I think, are huge to watch. The habit has to be there.
That's a great point, Leah. Like, you know, it makes me think of Jeff Woods and how he's always talking about in his 411. Like sometimes you have to take the bar so low that you can't not step over it. And so, you know, maybe I don't know if this is right or wrong. The group, let's discuss. Like maybe you've got to lower it to 10-minute script practices every Monday. Like if you guys have no standards, like everything is a suggestion and your team has never enforced a thing ever, then maybe you have to take the bar so low that it's like 10 minutes one time a week. And that's like almost impossible to not step over it as long as you're like super clear with everyone that it's not a suggestion. Like you must be there for that 10 minutes. And then you add Tuesday and then Wednesday, or, you know, you take it back to Paula's plan, you know, like you let everybody know you're headed to 7 or 5 days a week, but that you're going to start with just 10 minutes. Like we can't not, you know, step over it. It's a 10-minute bar.
Because if there's an uncomfortableness, like even like for us script practice, like she said, you know, you want them to do it. If you're like, oh, okay, we're going to go to, you know, 30 minutes every day for 5 days a week, and they're like uncomfortable with that, then all of a sudden they get really uncomfortable with this big idea of it. But if you start smaller and they're comfortable with that 10 minutes, then all of a sudden 2 days at 10 minutes doesn't feel like a task. But if you throw it all in there at once, that's why I just thought about it like that, especially for my group. I'm going to do steps, you know, like up to the top. And yes, clarity as to where we're going, but small bites at a time, because I think that will also give them confidence in it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to get out of your comfort zone for 10 minutes once a week, right? And then all of a sudden it's like my comfort zone expanded. Mm-hmm. I'm totally comfortable with this. So to do it 5 days a week doesn't feel as big.
Here's something I'd love to throw out to the group. So what was Megan's point number 3? Someone chime in.
It's a quiz. I love quizzes.
At the beginning of the call.
Action.
What was Meg? Yeah, action. And what specifically about that action?
To walk, not run.
What else? Remember, she said own it. Own that solution, which is the action and the result, right? Meaning like just do something about it. So if their step 2 was own the opportunity, and number 3 was own the solution and stuff, it makes me think, what would it look like if we did a 30, 60, 90 and shared it with the team of what that plan was going to look like to get back into standards? Right? So now week 2, week 3 is not a surprise. Now it's, look, I made a mistake. We need to get back on track. Here is my 90-day plan to do so and what that's going to look like and the benchmarks we're going to hit.
And think how great you'll be after 90 days.
My brain just exploded. I hope you guys are writing all that down. Like, this is what I love about this group. We all just got better in these last, like, we've only been on the phone 40 minutes. And I feel like we solved something here. We just systematized changing your standards or creating new standards. We literally just built a system out of thin air. We're geniuses.
Everybody gets a golf clap.
What else are you guys, what's happening in your real teams? What else would you like the brain trust that you have here in all these teams to discuss?
Do we want to discuss consequences if they're not living up to the expectations and standards? So what do you think about stepping the consequences too? Because everybody can have a bad week.
Mhm.
So you don't meet the standards for 1 week. Okay, it's a bad week.
I'd be interested in knowing what consequences are you enforcing?
Mhm.
How do
Ultimately,
you do that?
ultimately, the consequence is whether you get to stay on the team or not.
But
Yeah,
what's the
that's-
in-between stuff?
And there's not a lot of in-between stuff. It's how far are you going to let them go and not meeting the standard? Like, in my mind, and Zach and Megan, you can weigh in on this, it's unreasonable to expect everybody to meet the standard every single week, every single month for the entirety of their career. So there has to be a little bit of leeway there, and yet how big is that leeway?
So they were doing something on our team where, because it's a little different here in Mexico, but like, so if they're on the team, they're not paying cap. That's part of the benefit to being on the team, and the team pays their cap. And if they're out of standard in a certain amount of time, then that following month, they pay, on their first deal, they pay cap to the team. And then they will continue to pay cap to the team after a certain amount of incidences until they're back in standard. So that's kind of the way they've been looking at it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other little things that go with that. If you're in standard, like we'll pay for mega camp, we'll pay for certain things for you to anything you want to, classes you want to take to learn that and whatnot. But if you get out of standard, then those things are on you to pay for, to take care of.
How long would they be are you allowing them to be out of standard before you're not a fit for our team? Because remember, you're only as good as your lowest producer.
Well, that's what I'm fixing right now. They were allowed to stay forever and ever and ever. And so that's what I'm revisiting, is what those standards are, how to put them in place. And I only at this point don't have all those agents anymore. So the good news is I'm basically starting clean with just me as new and them and one other person. So it'll be a whole lot easier to put this stuff into place now, so that going forward, it's not an unknown to somebody. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But and the question is the leeway in the lag measure or the lead measure? Right. So like the contacts and the dials, or is it in the closing and the pendings?
Or is it both? Because again, the struggle is the example I gave earlier, Zach, they're doing all the activities. They're doing all the lead measures. Where they're failing is on the lag measures. And if they're failing on the lag measures, they're not bringing value to the team. The team is investing in them, and we're not getting anything from it.
Well, and then the question, yeah, that's an amazing point. And it reminds me then, do we create a standard around the actions they're taking to grow into that gap that they have? Right? Meaning, like, let's say it's conversion. So to that point, then do we set a new standard that's like, you need to attend this much script and role play practice to get your conversion rate up?
Yeah.
Because this is where it's at.
Yeah. And to me, at that point, it makes sense to put them on an improvement performance plan, because you can define that. Like, this is what needs to happen in the next 30 days for you to increase your skill level to show the results.
To get back into standard.
Yes, to get back into standard.
If
Yeah.
you're gonna do the,
Yeah,
do the work.
Yeah, to me, it's more black and white when they don't do the lead measure. Because if they're not doing the lead measure, which is activity based, like what Paul is saying, then it's more about you're out of integrity, like Megan was saying, with what we're expecting and what you're doing, not a skill issue.
And you can have the flip side too. So just as you guys are thinking through, like, where do you want to go with standards? You can also have people who hit the lag measure, but resist the lead measure. Like, for whatever reason, they're like a more seasoned agent. So you do have to think about, like, is the lead measure standard a measure for everyone, whether they hit the lag measure or not? Or is that only a standard if they're not hitting the lag measure? Like, which one are you really saying is the penultimate thing on your team? And if you don't do that, then you have this other thing that you have to accomplish. Or is your culture just like, it doesn't matter if you're producing 100 units a year, you've got to lead generate, you know, this many or this much or whatever. And I don't think there's a right, like a one right answer. I think it's your right answer for your team's culture. Like, we had no lag measure standard transparently. And it was only an issue ever one time, like what Paul is describing. We had that one time. And ultimately, unfortunately, because we had no lag measure standards, there was nothing to help her exit on her own vis-a-vis standards. So I had to fire her. So that was unfortunate, but it happened only one time. So it was not too big of a deal. But for us, it was more like culturally, we didn't have a standard for closings. We only had a standard for activities.
Which is a great reminder. You do need a standard. You do need a standard for both because of that situation. Because you will have those people that, as much as they want it, as hard as they work, they're just not cut out for that.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it where people are like, I don't care what you have to do to get your 2 appointments for the day and your 1 contract. As long as you hit that, then go home and enjoy the rest of your day. Where there's other teams that are like, you are sitting in your seat, lead generating for 3 hours a day, and I don't care if you set any appointments. You know, like, it's, I've seen it go both ways, and it's always kind of a.
And yet, if they're not bringing in business and they're not contributing to the team, all they're doing is costing you resources.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it too, like, I don't know what y'all think about this. Let's throw this out and discuss it. So I think personally, you sometimes can have like written standards in such a way that it's not one person, all standards apply. So like, if you do have an agent who's closing 100 a year and your standard's only 20, you know, maybe that person, like, maybe once you bring in 50 units to the team, you don't have to follow the, you know, if like on a rolling 12-month basis, you're always producing 50, 50, 50, maybe you can do whatever the hell you want. I don't know.
And I always phrase that as, you've earned the right.
Right.
You've earned the right to make your own schedule, create the business the way you want to create the business.
Love that. Earn the right, and I'll leave you alone.
As long as you define it so other agents know how to qualify for that too, and it's
Right.
not just like, oh, your favorite over there doesn't have to
Right.
do all the stuff.
They're not doing it, so why should I? No, they earned the right to not have to do that.
And that works for your rainmaker too. If your rainmaker doesn't lead gen, and yet that's something you hold the other agents accountable to, and yet they can earn the right to not have to lead gen, well, your rainmaker's already earned the right. You don't even have to have a conversation of why he's different than everybody.
Yeah. And honestly, even if if you follow the model where, like, let's say you don't have clearly written standards, you only have a lag measure, right? Like, we only expect you to close this much. there's something to be said how important a 411 is, because it also brings up what Leah was talking about with consistency. Because there is a point where if you show over the course of 3 to 4 weeks that the activities the person's doing or not doing is on there, that's a whole different conversation that goes back to the black and white, right? So maybe you don't say, hey, 3 hours of lead gen, you don't have anything like that. And yet if you're talking to me and my goal was, hey, I'm going to contact 100 people this week and I didn't do it, right? I've set my own standard that I'm now not meeting for the team. So the 411 is really powerful that way. Or if you use the 4 conversations, it also can be really powerful because consistency shows up, which then can turn into a deeper conversation like Paula and Megan said.
I love the 4 conversation tool. It's one of my favorites for coaching.
I wanted to pipe in because we're doing something a little different with our standards. We have some very clear cut, like you have to have 200 people in your SOI and call them every 90 days. You have to do that. Sometimes it's a suggestion. We're bad at that. But then in terms of production and things like that, we do based off of their own goals. So if their goal is to hit 12, like that's what they have to hit. And we use conversion rates to back it in for lead and lag measures. But if they have a goal of 12, great. 12 is great. If their goal is 36, then they have to do more. And we try to allocate resources based off of people's goals, which is probably the biggest con to how we're doing it, because it's very difficult to figure out who gets how many leads and things like that. But
So Cameron, based
helps
off of that, if their goal is 36, but they do 28, then what happens?
Right now, nothing, which is the suggestion part. But we do a lot more talk about the lead measures. So we imagine like, okay, if you're going to close 36, what's your average conversion for under contracts and then appointments? And how come you didn't get those appointments? Like, what activities are you not doing to get those appointments? Because, or how do you need to improve your appointments to improve your conversion rates? Those are the 2 things, either more appointments or better conversion.
I have a question for you on that, though. Do you, when you let them set their goals, because we ran into this when I came in and I was looking at how they were doing it, they let the agents set their goals, but when I took my agents and I added up their goals didn't fit with our goals. Like, you see what I'm saying? So if we had a goal of 60 and I added up their goals, we were at 27. And so, like, are you allowing them to have a standard at the bottom and then their goals on top of that? And then if they didn't hit that number, because that's what we had to adjust to, right? Like, if my standard is, again, for lack of a number, 12, then they have to have a number from 12 or above.
No, we kept it pretty open. And if we added everyone's up and they weren't to the number that we wanted, then we knew we were short people. We didn't have enough of the agents, because if we wanted to hit 60 and we only had 30, then we needed to double the number of agents or go find one awesome agent doing 30. And so the problem, the other thing that we had is some agents think that they're amazing. And so when we're setting goals in November, they're like, yeah, everything I did last year, I'm going to triple that. And we have to get very real with them. And that's another difficult part of it.
Yeah. So Cameron and Leah, that's how ours was set up. Like, I coached all the agents to their goals, which were always above our standards, and they couldn't go below the standard. Right. So hitting their goal was up to them. That was their goal, not our goal. They had to, at minimum, to stay on the team.
Yeah.
We moved to that as well, Paula, because we started like what you were doing, Cameron, like what you said, we allowed them to build it, and then we were going out to hire. The challenge I ran into my first year was because I was always behind. So my projected was like, let's say to do 60, like that in the example, all of their goals only added up to do 30. So I needed to get another 30 transactions. But depending on how long it took me to get that agent in, I'm now behind on my profit goal for the end of the year. So it's like I was always chasing a number that wasn't there, which is why then we moved to like what Paula said, where you could make up your own goals, and yet we had a minimum of where you had to hit, or the benchmark.
Yeah. And it's like
Just food for thought. Like that was just my perspective, what ran into. That's not a right or wrong or anything. That's just what I ran into.
Yeah, it is frustrating when someone sets a goal of like 6 transactions. It's like, that's lower than the national average of an agent. Like, you're on a team, you have the support, I'm giving you leave. You can do better than an average.
Coffee is for closers. Get out.
Yeah.
Coffee is for closers. Get out. Your vision does not fit in my vision.
What I do love, though, is what I heard Cameron say, is he essentially is doing an economic model for each agent, which is awesome, because if you have one of those for each agent, you can get real clear on what their results need to be at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we make them do that and give it to us. So we're not doing all the work. We walk them through it.
Yeah. And it's really easy to coach them to that, because now they understand what all the numbers mean. They understand why they should keep track of their numbers.
I like having that bottom goal number, the standard number, and then their numbers, because then there's definitely, the measures there, right? Because then it's like their stretch goal, and then, you know, oh, I didn't really do what I wanted to do this month, but they didn't fall below standard, so there's still room to pick them back up with how they're feeling about it, and build from there.
I hope you guys all wrote down at least $3 million ideas, because there were a lot of good ones on this call. I know I did. That last one, by the way, was $1 million idea, Paula and Zach and Cameron. Like your agent economic model, every agent should have their own. Help them understand the conversion rates. Talk about a fire to improve your conversion rate. If you understand that improving your conversation to appointment set conversion rate by 5% would triple your money, like there's nothing like that to motivate an agent to go get educated. So $1 million idea. And I think that concludes it. So Paula, when is our first, by when do we need to have read our book?
So the last Thursday of August, which is the 27th. So the 27th of August, we'll do book club.
And Zach, I think it was you. What's our September book? Just to kind of like get people excited about it.
Now we have time to order it.
The Road Less
The
Stupid.
Road Less Stupid.
That's right. That's right.
Paul is amazing.
Paula has a memory like it's unbelievable, y'all. It is unbelievable. Don't say something and think she won't remember, because she has a.
Yeah, I was frantically flipping through my notes, like, what book did I say?
I love it. So order that one too. Get that one on deck for yourself. And yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm excited about it. And next week, we're talking about something. It'll be good.
We're talking about something?
You guys are so interesting.
I will tell you what we're talking
remember.
about.
She's looking it up.
One of my favorite topics, something.
Something. It's bound to delight and surprise.
So next week, our topic is agent motivation, how to find the motivated agents and ditch the ones that aren't.
That will be fun.
Can I bring a friend?
Bring your brooms. We'll have a mess to clean up next week during our conversation as we discuss this.
You sure can bring a friend, Kathy. I'll bring as many friends as you want to our Let's Chat series here. So we'll see you next week, everybody.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.